students, today we are going to discuss aggregate demand and related concepts. The objectives of this chapter are meaning of aggregate demand, components of aggregate demand schedule, aggregate demand curve, and aggregate supply meaning, schedule and curve. First we have meaning of aggregate demand. It refers to the total demand for final goods and services in an economy during a year. एक साल में, एक अकाउंटिंग ईयर में सारे सेक्टर्स से कितनी डिमांड आ रही है, दैट टोटल डिमांड इज कॉल्ड द एग्रीगेट डिमांड. Or we can also say, because we actually spend our income on the demand. Therefore, the aggregate expenditure that different sectors of an economy are willing to incur during a given period of time, that is also called aggregate demand. क्योंकि हम अपनी डिमांड पर ही एक्सपेंडिचर करते हैं, therefore aggregate demand is equal to aggregate expenditure. Further, we have the components of aggregate demand. Here we have first private final consumption expenditure, then investment expenditure, government expenditure, and last is net exports, that is exports minus imports. The difference between exports and imports is called net exports. So we can say AD, which is aggregate demand, is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Here C stands for private final consumption expenditure, I stands for investment expenditure, G stands for government expenditure, and X minus M, that is the difference of export and import, it is the next exports. So if we discuss them in detail, the components of aggregate demand, first one is private final consumption expenditure. It is called private. Why? Because here we are taking into account the total expenditure incurred by the households. जो भी हमारे हाउसहोल्ड सेक्टर है, देखिए बच्चे हमें पता है, वी ऑल नो दैट वी हैव 4 सेक्टर्स इन एन इकोनॉमी. द फर्स्ट इज हाउसहोल्ड, देन वी हैव द प्रोडक्शन सेक्टर, then government sector, and then rest of the world. Therefore, the household sector, the total expenditure incurred by the household sector is called, on the goods and services, is called the consumption expenditure, the private final consumption expenditure. It is denoted by the symbol C, which we have already seen. It depends upon your personal disposable income. आपके पास कितनी income है which is at your disposal. आप कितना खर्चा कर रहे हो उस पे डिपेंड करता है आपका कंजम्पशन. जैसे जैसे इनकम बढ़ती है वैसे आपका कंजम्पशन भी बढ़ता है. कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर ऑल्सो इंक्रीजेस एज द इनकम इंक्रीजेस. It is also known as household consumption expenditure, क्योंकि जो बच्चे आपकी डिमांड रहती है वही आपका एक्सपेंडिचर बनता है. Therefore, it is also known as household consumption expenditure, or we can say that it is private final consumption expenditure. Second, we have investment expenditure. It refers to the total expenditure incurred by द प्राइवेट फर्म्स ऑन कैपिटल गुड्स. जितनी भी हमारी मशीन्स हैं या टूल्स हैं, इन्वेस्टमेंट इम्प्लीमेंट्स हैं, रॉ मटेरियल हैं, उस पर जितना भी हमारा इन्वेस्टमेंट हो रहा है प्राइवेट फर्म्स का, दैट इज़ कॉल्ड द इन्वेस्टमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर. चाहे फिर वो हमारे फिक्स्ड एसेट्स पे हो या फिर इन्वेंट्रीज में. स्टूडेंट्स, इट डिपेंड्स अपॉन द मार्केट रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट. वाई? बिकॉज एज योर इंटरेस्ट राइजेस, मार्केट रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट पे ही हमारा इन्वेस्टमेंट जो है डिपेंड करेगा. एज योर इंटरेस्ट रेट राइजेस, द इन्वेस्टमेंट फॉल्स. Therefore, we can say there is a negative relation between market rate of interest and private investment. Because जैसे जैसे आपका रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट बढ़ेगा वैसे ही आपके जो लोन हैं मार्केट में दैट विल बिकम कॉस्टलियर, और जितना लोन कॉस्टलियर होगा उतने इन्वेस्टमेंट जो है वो कम होगी. देयरफॉर एज द इंटरेस्ट रेट राइजेस द इन्वेस्टमेंट फॉल्स. There it is induced by the profit motive, that's why it is called induced investment. And if it is not guided by the profit motive, it is called autonomous investment. Autonomous investment is that rate of investment which is somewhere it is constant as the income increases. Why? Because it is not guided by the income or profit. Therefore, the investment which is not guided by the profit is called the autonomous investment. Then we have government expenditure. जितना भी government incur करेगी expenditure on the capital goods or the consumer goods to satisfy needs of the economy. Government भी बहुत ज़्यादा खर्चा करती है, expenditure करती है on the different goods and services, whether they are consumer or capital goods. So that expenditure is called the government expenditure and it is indicated by capital G. Then we have net exports. It is the difference between exports and imports, and it is indicated by capital X stands for exports and capital M which stands for imports. The difference between exports and imports is called net exports. So we can say AD is equal to, which is aggregate demand, it is equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. These are the different components of aggregate demand. Now we have aggregate demand in two sector model. If we talk about two sector, here we have only household and production sector. Therefore, we are taking only two components of aggregate demand, that is C and I, that is consumption and investment. It depends upon the level of income in the economy. Aggregate demand depends directly on the level of income of the economy. If the level of income of the economy increases, the expenditure, or we can say the aggregate demand, also increases. Therefore, there is a positive relationship between income and expenditure. So here there is a table showing the consumption and investment and as well as the income. So if we talk about aggregate demand, it is C plus I. Here we can see even if when the income is zero, there is certain level of consumption. Here it is 40. This is called the autonomous consumption because there will be a certain level of consumption which is a necessary consumption even if your income is zero. And further, when the income increases, the consumption also increases. Here comes a point when income is equal to consumption, and then further when the income increases, the consumption is less than the income. It means the consumption is now not increasing at the level of income. जिस तरह से हमारा income बढ़ रहा है उतना अब हमारा consumption नहीं बढ़ रहा, because at certain level the propensity to consume it starts falling. Okay, therefore as the income increases, the consumption also increases, but not to that extent where the income is increasing. Then we have investment here. Investment, we can say here it is a type of autonomous investment which is fixed. As the income increases, the autonomous investment is not increasing. It is there only at 20 level. Okay, it means we can say it is constant as the income increases. So finally we have aggregate demand which is C plus I, and if we add the corresponding consumption and investment, we will get the aggregate demand. Here we have 40 plus 20 is 60, 120 plus 20 it is 140, and so on and so forth. Diagrammatically we can see here on the y-axis we have aggregate demand and on the x-axis we have income or the GDP. Investment, we have seen that it is autonomous investment, in it is not increasing or falling as income increases. It is constant. Therefore, it is donated by this horizontal line. And consumption curve, this is the consumption curve where it starts from the y-axis, because even if the zero income, at the zero income we have certain level of consumption. Therefore, when we add C and I, we get the aggregate demand, which is starting from this, not from the origin but from the y-axis. So this is the aggregate demand curve. We have C plus I. By adding consumption and investment, we get the aggregate demand curve. Further, we have aggregate supply. Aggregate supply refers to the money value of final goods and services that all the producers are willing to supply in an economy in a given period of time. एक इकोनॉमी में सारे producers, all producers, and their willingness of supply of goods and services in the economy in a given period of time, that is called aggregate supply. We can also say that aggregate supply is equal to national income. They are one and the same thing. Why? Because as the supply increases, the production increases. And as the production process increases, it offers more employment opportunities. And with the more employment, there will be more income. So, we can say aggregate supply is equal to national income. And national income is equal to consumption plus saving. Income is divided into consumption and saving. Why? Because the part of income either we consume or we save. That's why we can say Y, which is income, is equal to aggregate supply, and it is further equal to consumption plus saving. So it is one and the same thing. Aggregate demand, which we have discussed, that it was big from the household, from the consumer side of point of view, and we have now aggregate supply, which is from the producer side, from the production point of view. Therefore, aggregate supply is equal to national income, which is equal to consumption plus savings. So here we have the tabular and diagrammatic representation of aggregate supply. In this table, we have income, which is increasing from 0 to 400, consumption, which is increasing from 40 to 360. As the income increases, the consumption also increases. On the other hand, if we see the saving is first negative, it becomes 0, and then it is positive. Why is this so? Students, you can see that at the level when the income is less than consumption, here, when income is 0, consumption is 40. When income is 100, consumption is 120. Here, the saving is negative, because the part of consumption which is not supported by the income is fulfilled with the help of saving. मतलब अगर हमारा कंजम्पशन ज़्यादा है और इनकम कम है, तो हम अपनी सेविंग्स को यूटिलाइज करके अपने कंजम्पशन को फुलफिल कर रहे हैं, because there are some necessities of life which has to be fulfilled. Therefore, the income is less than consumption and the saving is negative. At the point when income is equal to consumption, the saving is 0. There is no saving at all. When income increases further, the consumption increases, but here now the rate of increase of consumption is less than the rate of increase in income. Therefore, जो part बच जाता है, वो part of income which is now not consumed by the consumer, that part of income is now saved. Therefore, there is positive saving. And ultimately, we have aggregate supply, which is equal to C plus S, that is consumption plus savings, and we here have 0, then 100, 200, 300 and 400. So we can see that as the income is behaving, the same way aggregate supply is behaving. Therefore, we can say income is equal to aggregate supply. So it is shown by a positive sloping supply curve, and it is starting from the origin. This 45-degree line, or the reference line, we can say it is the aggregate supply curve or the income curve. Now we have consumption function. Consumption function is nothing but the functional relationship between consumption and income. There is a relationship between consumption and income, which is said the consumption function. That C is the function of income. Here, income is denoted by capital Y. Consumption function represents the willingness of households to purchase goods and services at a given level of income during the given period of time. At different levels of income, there is different consumption level. The law of consumption states that as income increases, consumption also increases, but less than the increase in income. So consumption is equal to autonomous consumption plus induced consumption. The same thing, the same function can be seen here with the help of this table, where income is increasing and the consumption is also increasing, but less than increase in income. Even when the income is zero, there is certain level of consumption. Why? Because consumption can never be zero. Even at zero level of income, there are some basic needs which need to be fulfilled. Even at zero level of income, and to fulfill those basic needs, we used past savings. Therefore, there is certain consumption even at the zero level of income. And further, as the income increases, consumption also increases. Here we have the income curve and the consumption curve. Income curve is starting from the origin, and it is positively sloping. Whether consumption curve is starting from the y-axis. Why? Because even at the zero level of income, we are denoting income on the x-axis. Therefore, even at the zero income, there is certain level of consumption. Therefore, consumption curve starts from y-axis and it is positively sloped but a little flatter curve. Why it is flatter? Because here it shows that consumption is also increasing but less than increase in income. And the point where the consumption and income intersects, this point is called break-even point. Means when income is equal to consumption, that point is called break-even point. Here we have this point when income is equal to consumption. This is called break-even point. Students often confuse it with the equilibrium point. So this is not the equilibrium point, but it is called the break-even point. Always remember it. Types of propensity to consume. We have two aspects of propensity to consume. First is average propensity to consume and second is marginal propensity to consume. Average propensity to consume, that is also called APC, it is the ratio of consumption expenditure to the corresponding income level. So we can say APC is equal to consumption divided by income. That is average propensity to consume. Here we can see in this table, when we divide consumption with income, we get our average propensity to consume. Some important points here to be noted is average propensity to consume is greater than 1 as long as consumption is more than income. As long as the consumption is more than income, the APC we can see it is more than 1 or greater than 1. APC is equal to 1 when consumption is equal to income, or we can say we have the break-even point. When consumption is equal to income, APC is 1. And APC is less than 1 when consumption is less than income. We can see it here. When consumption is less than income, APC is less than 1. APC falls with increase in income because people start saving as income increases. As the income increases, we also start saving a part of income. That's why APC falls, the average propensity to consume falls. APC, always remember, can never be zero. कभी भी zero नहीं हो सकता average propensity to consume, as there is always autonomous consumption. Further, we have marginal propensity to consume. It is the ratio of change in consumption expenditure to change in total income. It means how the addition in income is changing or adding to the consumption also. So, the change in consumption divided by change in income is called the marginal propensity to consume. We have here the change in consumption and change in income. When we divide them, we get the marginal propensity to consume. Important points to be noted here are the value of MPC varies between 0 to 1. हमेशा MPC की वैल्यू 0 और 1 के बीच में वेरी करती है. MPC is poor ऑफ पुअर इज मोर देन दैट ऑफ रिच. जितने आप पुअर होंगे, अगर कोई भी इंसान अगर जितना पुअर होगा, उसका मार्जिनल प्रोपेंसिटी टू कंज्यूम ज़्यादा होगा. वाई? बिकॉज द पुअर हैज़ द, or we can say has the more requirement than the rich. So the marginal propensity to consume of poor will be more than that of rich. As the income of a poor increases, they consume more. MPC falls with increase in income. जितना आपका income बढ़ती जाएगी, marginal propensity to consume fall होता है. Why? Because consumption increases but less than the increase in income. Therefore, the MPC, it is also called the slope of consumption curve. The MPC, that is the slope of consumption curve, it falls at the as the income increases. Therefore, the slope of consumption curve, we can say it is a little flatter, which shows that MPC falls with increase in income. Further, we have saving function. Saving function refers to the functional relationship between saving and national income. Saving is also the function of income. As the income increases, saving also increases. Saving function, or we can say the propensity to save, show saving of households at a given level of income. जितना भी आपका income होगा, उस पे आपकी कितनी saving होगी, that is called the saving function. And y is equal to c plus s. Income किसके बराबर है? यहाँ हम income को consume करते हैं और we save it. Therefore, income is equal to consumption plus saving. And the saving is equal to y minus c. So we can say here it is negative a plus 1 minus by. Here b is equal to marginal propensity to consume. It can be explained with the help of the given table and diagram. Here we have the income and the consumption. As income is increasing, consumption is also increasing. But here we have saving, which is first negative, then 0, and then it is positive. Why? Because here, as far as the consumption is more than the income, saving is negative. Because to fulfill the basic needs, we have past savings. So we utilize the savings to fulfill the part of consumption which is not supported by the income. Therefore, when income is less than consumption, saving is negative. Then here comes the break-even point. It should be noted that at break-even point, income is equal to consumption. At break-even point, income is equal to consumption and saving is equal to 0 here. And further, when the income rises, the consumption rises but not as the income, and the saving becomes positive here. So as the income increases, saving also increases. Negative saving, or we can say the dis-saving, is shown by this part of the curve. It is below the origin point here. It is below this. Here it is called this saving part. Then saving becomes 0 and then it is positive. So this is the saving curve. Like propensity to save, pro also has two aspects. It also has two aspects like average propensity to save and marginal propensity to save. Average propensity to save, it is the ratio between saving and income. Here in this table we can see the ratio between saving and income is average propensity to save. Important points here are that APS can never be 1 or more than 1. Okay, ना ये 1 होगा, यूनिट होगा, यूनिटरी होगा, ना ही ये मोर देन 1 होगा. It will be less than 1. APS can be negative or less than 1. Less than 1 भी हो सकता है. It can be negative also. Why? Because we have negative savings here. Therefore, APS is also negative. It can be negative. APS rises with the increase in income. जैसे जैसे income बढ़ेगी, APS, average propensity to consume, average propensity to save also rises. Here we have marginal propensity to save. It is the ratio between the change in saving and change in income. Here we have the change in saving, change in income. When we divide them both, we get the marginal propensity to save, and it varies between 0 to 1. The relationship between APC and APS, the average propensity to consume and average propensity to save, is that average propensity to consume and average propensity to save, when they are added, it is equal to 1. So always remember that APC plus APS is equal to 1. And MPC and MPS also, when we add them, it is equal to 1. Here is the derivation of saving curve from the consumption curve. A is the break-even point. Here, income is equal to consumption. At the break-even point, income is equal to consumption. We have already discussed it, that here the savings become 0. At point B, we can say that in saving is 0. So this is how the saving curve can be derived with the help of the consumption curve, and before this B point, saving is negative, there is this saving, and after this B point, after the break-even point, saving becomes positive. And this is how we can derive the saving function, the saving curve, from the consumption curve. This we have completed this chapter. I hope this was helpful to all of you. Thank you.